You're painting metallics wrong. I'm painting metallics wrong. We are all painting metallics in the wrong way. Traditionally, we've been taught to paint a darker color or a mid-tone as our base and then go over with all the edges with a lighter or a brighter color. And that is just one particular style, and we all know what style that is. But what if we treated true metallics like non-metallics? Let's see if it works.
We're going to kick off this idea with death metal from the Warpaint Fanatic range from the Army Paint. The idea behind this is really quite simple. We're essentially going to use that black primer and then we're just going to base coat with death metal. I did thin this down just a little bit with water just to help us get a nice smooth coverage, so I did give it 2 coats. And we're going to hit absolutely everything that we want metallic. This is basically going to be our darkest color, which may feel a little bit weird because you can see how bright it is there in the light, but in the shadows, this stuff gets really, really dark. And that's going to give us a massive contrast and almost give it kind of like a chrome feeling when we're done. Now we need a desaturated gold, and in our case, it's tainted gold. What we're going to do here is use the light that's reflecting off the base coat. Because our base coat was metallic, it's going to reflect light because that's what metallics do. The tainted gold is really, really similar in color to the actual reflections that are coming off of the death metal, which means in a lot of spots you're only going to notice a very, very subtle change. And that's exactly what we want here. We want that subtle change. We only want the reflection. And now because we're painting a lighter color on top of those shapes and those same shapes are still giving off the same reflections, we're actually going to step up in brightness again. In some cases, like the leg here, you will have to find a slightly different angle that still works with your other reflections and paint in a little bit more than there actually is. Now, all I've done here is worked in a sort of a cone shape for the top of the leg. The knees were easy because it's just a circle. And then of course we are going to pick out all those slightly sharper details and the higher raised areas. But from these different angles, that's also what's going to give us a semi-chrome kind of feeling, because we have the stark contrast between the really dark recesses and then the really high highlights. Just how we work with regular acrylic paint, we also want to thin down this paint just a little bit. It helps us to get that smooth coverage. Now, a smoother coverage off the brush with metallics generally means it could be a little bit patchier, but that second coat's really going to make that pop. Now we're going to go into the highest highlights. This is the brightest silver that the Army Painter have in the Fanatic set. And we're going to use this for our highest highlight and essentially do the exact same thing that we did in the last step. We're going to go out and pick all the highest, shiniest points, and we already have the guide from the actual light reflecting now off that tainted gold. Things like the hard edges on the armor or the top of the curves of the armor, a little spectral round highlight for the knee, or anything that's spherical. I did go back with tainted gold afterwards and clean up a little bit, but we're going to have to go to the wings because I know we're going to get questions out the wazoo about how we did the wing. And honestly, there's no secret sauce to it. I base coated the whole thing white because we want to get as vivid as we absolutely possibly can. And when we want to go neon, we pull out the Army Painter fluorescence in the air range. Now, I'm just pushing this through the airbrush because it makes a really quick, easy gradient. And if you don't have an airbrush, that's fine. You can paint this on and then glaze in the transitions. Painting and glazing with fluorescent paints is a little bit harder since they are that little bit thinner. They're very, very transparent, but that just takes patience. After the hot pink, we're coming in with that fluorescent blue and we're going to make a secondary gradient on the inside. And then this one's actually really, really easy to fix up from here. That center gradient where you can see that little bit of a bold fade, we're going to come in with purple and blend those two in together. And that's it. That's how I'm going to be looking at true metallic metals from here on out. You can see as it's turning around the semi-chrome effect that we get from boosting the highlights, and when the light shows us where to paint the highlights, it makes it really, really simple. 3 paints, 1 technique, and honestly, the armor we did in about 15 minutes, which makes it something that we can easily replicate for an entire army. A huge thanks to InGames for sponsoring the channel. A massive thank you to the Army Painter for supplying us with the Fanatics range before release. And as always, big love to all of our supporters and the Prismatic Patreon heretics. We love you all, and we'll see you next Tuesday.